Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to see all of you at day 4 of APSIA's Diversity Forum Advisor Workshop. It's been a great week, and I know this session is going to make things even better. We're going to be talking about accessing and affording graduate school and critical experiences with some amazing panelists. My name is Carmen Mazzara. I am Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We are so happy to have this be our 4th annual Diversity Forum Advisor Workshop, a little different than usual, but that enables us to involve so many more of you. Hopefully you have seen the packet of information for the week, which includes all of our amazing speaker bios, the agenda of all of the opportunities we've been hosting this week, and also the list of the sponsors and investors who make this week possible. In particular, I want to thank the Open Society Foundations, Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School, the Robertson Foundation for Government, Texas A&M's Bush School, and the University of California, San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy. We will be recording this event and adding it to the YouTube playlist that has all of the other sessions we've had this week. We also hope you'll join us tomorrow, Friday, June 5th, for a session on what APSIA is and does and how we can best be of service and assistance to you. So we look at this week really as the beginning of a conversation. We're going to add you into our community and tap you into a lot of the resources that we have. And so we look forward to talking with you today and tomorrow and much farther beyond that into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Christine Parra, and I'm going to make sure our 3rd speaker gets in, hopefully without any more problems. So with that, Christine, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome. My name is Christine Parra, and I'm an academic advisor over at Florida International University, and I specifically work within the Green School of International and Public Affairs. So this morning's session is we'll be talking about how to help students afford grad school and, different critical experiences. I will be introducing you to our 2 speakers. So we will have Dr. LaNitra Berger. She is the Director of Fellowships over at the Honors College in George Mason University. And hopefully we can get Lily Lopez McGee. She works at the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Program. So Carmen is working on hopefully getting her up and running. And I think she does. I think we'll get her soon. So for now, pretty much, we'll have our speakers talking for the next 30 minutes. I'll be asking different proposed discussion questions, and then we'll give you the opportunity at 10:05. Any questions that you may have for our speakers, you can just type it up in the chat box. And then I'll go ahead and ask them. So, Dr. Berger, are you ready? If you want, you could also maybe give a brief introduction of yourself.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for this discussion, and I appreciate the invitation to talk to you today. My name is LaNitra Berger, and I'm the Director of Fellowships at George Mason University. In that role, I help recruit and advise and support students who are trying to secure nationally competitive awards. And those awards span the range of science awards, international affairs awards, public service awards, and many of them support students who are interested in going to graduate school. One of the things that I am proud of at George Mason is our commitment to diversity and inclusive excellence. And that support allows me to really focus on recruiting underrepresented students and supporting them through this process. And so every year I assess my metrics. Hi, Lily. I've had, in many years, between 60 and 70% of the students who win awards through my office are low-income first-generation and minority students. And that makes me happy to see those students who come to George Mason who have maybe never heard of these awards or maybe never even thought of going to graduate school winning awards and succeeding both in graduate school and beyond. So in July, I will have been at George Mason for 10 years, and I now have, just many, many students who I've seen be successful through this process. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of my experiences and observations over those 10 years with you today.
Great. And now we have Lily on board. Lily, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Lopez McGee. I am the current director for the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program, which is a State Department administered grant, State Department funded grant administered by Howard University. So we are essentially a program that feeds in to the State Department's Foreign Service. The program mission is to increase diversity and excellence in the Foreign Service. So our fellows are folks who essentially represent the diversity of experiences in the United States, whether that be by racial and ethnic status, financial need, women, and other folks underrepresented in the department. I have been with Howard University since 2016. I started out administering the Wrangle program, which is our sister program at Howard, and really have been in the area of fellowship administration for almost 10 years now, which seems like a lot because who knew that fellowships were a thing, right? So I have been working with fellowship programs that have served undergraduate students as well as graduate students, and I can talk to some of the different ways to approach students as they're considering applying for these types of programs, how we generally do our outreach and recruitment to diverse student populations, because that messaging is quite a bit different, I think, than it is for maybe general audiences. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Carmen, and working through some of the technical difficulties in the age of virtual meetings.
But we made it through, which is great. So in our audience, we're expecting to have a lot of advisors, and as an advisor, we're always trying to help us get our students connected to different resources. In your opinion, what are the critical experiences that students need today, and what are ways that we can help students access them?
Those are really good questions. I would say that students really need to spend time as early as possible in their undergraduate studies, identifying and connecting with their advisors, and then having critical conversations with the advisors and just personally with themselves about what is their vision for their time as undergraduates. What is it that when you graduate and walk off the campus or log off the campus, God forbid, but when you leave, what are the things that you want to say, I have no regrets that I was able to do these things. And those activities should be connected to your intellectual interests and your personal career goals. So they can be a combination of things. They should be a combination of things. Everyone needs to have some type of work experience through internships or jobs. I believe, and I think the other panelists will agree with me, that every student needs to study abroad. That message is going to sound dissonant right now during the pandemic. But as an international educator myself, I believe that this type of experience is critical now more than ever. And it will take some creativity to figure out how to make that happen, but it will still be possible and should be something that should be done. And actually, if you are able to study abroad now during this difficult time, you will distinguish yourself from 99% of other students in the pool. So I believe that study abroad is still an important way of understanding yourself, your place in the world, and preparing for your career. The final thing that I would recommend is some type of community engagement. Even though we're all going to, the college experience is about a pre-professional experience for many students, it is also preparation to be a good citizen in your community and in your world. So any type of engagement in your community where you are learning about community needs and addressing community needs is not only important for you professionally, but it's important for you as a college graduate and a good citizen.
Really good point.
I would add a couple of notes that are, I think, complementary to what LaNitra's mentioned already. I think any opportunity you can take to get on the ground, hands-on experiential learning opportunities that can help you hone in on what you're interested in, I think would be really beneficial, in part because it helps you better understand what it is that you are interested in. It also helps you understand what you're not interested in. So those internships, those office internships, other internships that you can get with with places and positions that you think are in your line of interest. Anytime you get a chance to try to experience that and actually test that out is really helpful. I've heard, students who are interested in law school and have never worked in an office to explore what legal work looks like. I often give my husband as an example. He was really interested in going to law school, did a 6-week internship as a paralegal and said, nope, not for me. So just as much as they can hone your interest and say and confirm and validate what it is that you're interested in, it can also tell you maybe what you're not really compelled to do. So anytime you can do internships, the study abroad is a really great way of doing that. Community service development is also a way to hone that. Anytime you can implement your skills in a way that is really looking at that is helpful. I would also encourage you to do reflection in the time that you're engaging in these opportunities. I think oftentimes we encourage you as students to go out and do these things, and then you never come back and really reflect on what that means for you. So I'm asking you to think about your career, but then we don't actually talk to you about how it all fits in. So anytime you can do debriefings, if you have studied abroad, go and do some of the reentry activities with the Career Service Office, and that kind of thing really helps, especially to help hone in what it is that you're trying to communicate. Because you might think that you're saying one thing, and me as a hiring official or a fellowships officer is reading something completely different because you haven't really had the opportunity to hone in what it is that you're trying to say to us. The last thing that I'll say is that anytime as an undergrad, you have a unique opportunity that you have some time and space to network, not just with, I wouldn't just sit with your professors and faculty. Those are great folks. Keep in touch with them because they are going to be excellent resources for letters of recommendation and that kind of thing. But also with your peers. I was part of a fellowship program as an undergrad, and I think one of the really important aspects of that cohort dynamic is that we all had similar experiences that we could sort of both commiserate together on some of the challenges, but then also we had the opportunity to challenge each other. And now that we're mid and going into senior level professions, we can call on each other as resources for where we want to be. So anytime you have the opportunity to connect with people, don't just think of networking as an opportunity to get to the next step, but how is it that you can build a network of people who can support you along the way in different ways? Because you will need different things at different times. As an undergrad, you'll probably need folks to help guide you in your career track. As a graduate student, you're going to need folks to help you navigate the application process and information collecting in terms of what you want to do after you're done with grad school. As a mid-career professional, you might have a career change interest, right? And then you'll need folks who can actually help and support you, bring you up into different aspects. And I know that this is a little bit off from my traditional comments as a fellowship advisor specifically or fellowship director specifically, but I do think that building those networks of different types of people who can help you in different ways is really important.
Yes, you all brought up really, really good points. Especially in today's world, I'm always encouraging our students they have to be well-rounded. It's not just about coming to class and, and then going straight back home. We're encouraging them, get involved in at least one club on campus. If you're able to work, do an internship, study abroad, anything to help enrich your experiences in college, especially that for the traditional student, it is a time that they're trying to figure out who they are, what their interests are. And like you had mentioned, I think it was Lily, it'll help you know whether, you don't like something. You may have an idea of going to law school, and then you have an internship and you say, this is not for me. So those are really, really good points. So talking about internships and experiential learning opportunities, what are the opportunities that exist to make these things accessible and affordable for students? Especially those that are, if students may have to move, if they're from out of city.
I would say that this is a very difficult place to navigate right now because many places are closed or only working remotely. And some places may have had funding for internship programs and now they are not able to offer them. So there are probably fewer opportunities available in person than there have traditionally been. And that being said, finding an internship is challenging in any environment. So that's the downside of the current moment. The upside, though, is that many organizations are offering virtual opportunities. Mm-hmm. And those are very different than moving to New York for the summer and being in a big city in a big city office. But there's still important opportunities that will give you a sense of what it's going to be like to be a working person right now for the foreseeable future. And so really to be able to navigate those, I would definitely encourage you to continue looking at company websites, but also use your career centers and your networks to find those opportunities as well. Lily works most directly with the State Department, and I know I had several students doing virtual internships with the State Department before the pandemic. So I know that they have some successful models of virtual internships, but the process is still going to be the same. There's going to be a lot of students who are trying to get these opportunities. And so you'll really want to continue to hone your resume, do that networking, write strong cover letters. They will probably do video interviews very similar to these types of interviews. But those are the opportunities that will help you maximize the time that we have.
Yeah, and I'll echo what LaNitra's mentioned. I think the pandemic has, I think, done some interesting things in allowing organizations to reflect on what you actually need to do in person and what you can do virtually. So some organizations have been able to pivot a little bit more quickly than others, or more effectively than others, to provide virtual opportunities. And I would definitely encourage you to be open to virtual opportunities. Sometimes we have this impression that if you're not in person doing it, that you're somehow not learning as much or in the same way. But I think there is a lot of value to doing virtual internships. The State Department started their virtual student internship maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it's gone off. It's exploded in part because it has been so effective. One, in providing support to embassies and consulates and offices that really need additional support in places like social media or in administrative tasks or drafting memos and cables and that kind of thing. And it's also provided access to students who may not otherwise have the financial means to relocate for a particular position. There are also opportunities potentially on your campus to get credit for opportunities where you could apply your financial aid to cover the cost of credit for an internship or an externship or some other type of opportunity. So I would encourage you to look at and explore the opportunities that are at your career center and in some of the offices, your academic units, to see what's available to you in that way. Speaking of academic units, I think there are often funding pots around campuses that lots of students don't know about, where you may not be able to get funding externally to pay for the full cost of your internship, but your institution might be prepared to provide assistance with a flight, or perhaps with some support in terms of a living stipend. There's no harm in asking. The least they can say, the worst that happens is they tell you no. The best that could happen is that they say, yeah, actually, we do have an internship funding resource. I think part of it is just not knowing where to go. So ask your faculty members, ask your academic advisors. I promise you someone on campus can help you navigate that and point you in the right direction to the office who could best support you in that way. The other thing is that there are a whole host of fellowships. We've worked with fellows who I would call them your serial fellow applicants. They are the ones that apply to any and every fellowship they can. And I would certainly encourage you to look at those opportunities. We at Howard have pulled together a list of funded opportunities for specifically focused on folks from underrepresented backgrounds that essentially takes you from freshman year all the way up to after you've graduated from undergrad, giving you sort of an idea of what's out there. There are short-term opportunities that include weekend learning opportunities. There are also longer-term ones that are, a year or 2 year long fellowship programs. There are funded opportunities out there, and I think after we get out of the immediate reaction to the pandemic, many of those fellowships will begin to pivot in different ways that make it a little bit more accessible as well. Again, I think this is from someone from the institutional standpoint can say that we've really are thinking critically about the things that we absolutely need to do in person, maybe things that we don't. And I think that there are a lot of fellowship programs that are starting to consider and adapt. So there are ways to definitely get this funded. There's money out there, I promise you.
Just have to help the students find it. And if for our attendees, Carmen dropped the link for the virtual student federal service on opportunities through the State Department. So definitely click on that, read through it, save it to your bookmarks. That's definitely a very, very good resource to share with our students. And even, post-COVID, like you were saying, Lily, it's really given organizations more thought as to what we can do in person and what we can do, virtually. So I'm sure even more virtual opportunities are going to continue stemming from this. So what fears do you all believe keep students from competing for fellowships, grad school, and other opportunities? And how can advisors help address those fears?
Wow, yeah, fears abound for students. It's an intimidating process. It involves putting yourself on paper and talking about who you are to strangers. And for many of the awards with low acceptance rates, there's a good chance that you might not get the award, and that's intimidating for anybody. But for many students who are underrepresented, they come from underrepresented groups. There's a special challenge where they feel like they look at the list of winners and they might think, "Oh, I don't see anybody like myself. I don't belong here. How will I fit in?" So it's important to find your fellowship advisor on campus, and some campuses have designated fellowship advisors that work on all of the fellowships, and some campuses have different people, oftentimes faculty, who work on different types of fellowships. And seek those people out. Go to them, go to their office hours, schedule a meeting with them and explain what you're interested in and what you'd like to do, and let them tell you what the options are. I'm partially involved in this work because I didn't go to the fellowship office when I was an undergraduate. I didn't think that those opportunities were things that were attainable for me. And, you know, when I look back on it, I think that I missed out on some things because I didn't avail myself of those opportunities. And, you know, that was my own insecurity as an undergraduate. And so I don't want students to feel that way when they come into my office. My job is to help you find the right fit. So if you are an international affairs major, but you really want to apply for a science award, I'm going to tell you that award is not the right fit for you. But I'm also going to try to help you find the fellowship and opportunity that is the right fit. And that's where the advising really happens. So, you know, being afraid that you won't win the award is natural. And fellowship advisors they help you through the whole process so that they can help ease those fears. You know, Lily, I'm sure she'll talk more about what happens if you win an award, which is great. And then you might feel imposter syndrome of, you know, how did I win? I still don't think I belong here. And it can be intimidating even once you win the award to be amongst other people who are similarly accomplished. And I've had that experience as well with students who win awards and then they get to be part of a cohort and they suddenly think, oh, people will discover that I really shouldn't have won in the first place. So that's a fear. And then finally, you know, going on these experiences involves a lot of paperwork and a lot of other pieces that you have to fit together once you win. And sometimes students are afraid of any additional potential financial output or the fear of leaving your home campus and moving on to this next step can make people fearful. So a lot of different ways that you can feel a sense of fear. But the common thread is that because fellowship advising is a field, there are many of us now, many more of us than a few years ago. We're here to help you and support you and help you address those fears and face those fears so that you can be successful.
I echo LaNitra's comments about being afraid that you're not going to succeed. I think the most common thing that I hear from students is, well, the first question, and it's a veiled question, is, well, how many applications do you get? And the question there is, what are my chances for getting this award, right? And I always lead with, well, it's a 0% chance of getting an award if you don't apply. And I think one of the things that we often do, and I say we because I have frequently done this as when I was a student, is self-excluded myself from being considered before I even applied. So one is really challenging you and as advisors, your students to really think about what it is that's really keeping them from applying. Is it fear of failure, or is it the fact that there's a big commitment? For example, our programs have a 5-year service commitment on the back. And it's for folks who are recently out of undergrad or maybe seniors in undergrad, 7 years sounds like a long time. So it could also be a fact or a piece of contextualizing that. 7 years does seem like a long time, but you're getting a graduate degree. You're getting entry-level experience. So even if after the 5 years don't work out, or after the 5 years you're ready to try something new, there's always that opportunity, and you have the experience under your belt. So part of it is us as folks who are leading these programs and initiatives in really communicating what it is that students are getting into, because part of it might also be a perception about what it is or what it isn't. So there's that piece. LaNitra also mentioned representation in the profiles, and I certainly experienced this as a student as well. You see the profiles that are profiled on websites, and you may not see yourself in it. One, that may be that the folks on our end as administrators are not as cognizant or aware that the folks, we might be profiling them because we think it's an academic piece without thinking, oh, well, does this reflect the type of folks that we're trying to reach? For our programs, for Pickering and Wrangell, we're very intentional about the types of profiles that we put on our website, in part because the programs are geared towards folks who bring diversity with them to the department. So you'll see folks who are in different regions. You'll see folks with different financial backgrounds. You'll see folks from different religious backgrounds, everything, because we're trying to get a good mix of folks. So I know that we don't have fellowship directors on this call, but I would also put a call out to the folks who are leading these programs. And if you're an advisor, thinking very critically about the student profiles that you're putting on your websites, where you're going to provide the information and that kind of thing, because it does say a lot to the students who you're trying to attract, what it is, the messaging that you're putting out there. So I like to say that because the onus is on the student to find the information. It's also the onus on us as administrators to think critically about the messaging that we're sending. And sometimes we just don't think critically because, again, we're thinking in the space of us as fellowship administrators and not as students. So when I mentioned earlier about the recruitment piece, our recruitment strategy is very distinct because we have to spend a lot of time being mindful about the language that we use, the images that we're using, the offices that we're going to, how we're talking to advisors in terms of what the important pieces are to communicate. So I know that that's going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I do think it's an important thing to recognize.
And what kind of advice do you have for our advisors who are on the call? How can they go ahead and entice those students to come into your office to seek those opportunities?
Yes, getting the students in. I will confess to some amount of bait and switch. So I'm inviting students for casual meetings, just come and meet me and talk to me and see that I'm not really scary. So, we'll just talk and then I'll just slip in some advice about fellowships. What I'm going to say is, this is a forum about diversity. This is, there are some real issues as we see going on out in the world right now. And those issues directly affect us in academia. And one of the most important ones is a lack of representation of faculty on our campuses due to structural racism and other things. So there's not many diverse faculty on campus who can pick out a student and say, hey, come talk to me. You see what I do? I have a PhD, I teach, I do research. Is this something that you're interested in? You've never heard of a PhD before. I can tell you what it is and what is the pathway to get there. Same with the Foreign Service. I have a lot of students who come in and they have no idea what the Foreign Service is, but when they describe the type of work that they're interested in, they're describing the Foreign Service. So, just to be able to develop relationships with students so that they trust you and that you can slyly and casually drop these opportunities, and slowly but surely they are starting to understand not only that this is possible, but what the process is. So, the trust building, I think, is very key, as is the confidence building and addressing some of the issues that students come with imposter syndrome and perfectionism and other things. Those have been ingrained in these students for a very long time, and they're hard to undo just for one application. So part of being a fellowship advisor involves also helping to dismantle those types of that way of thinking so that when it is time to apply for an award, it's less of an issue.
I would also add that it's a real opportunity for you to recognize the strengths that students are bringing with them to the table. Often we're focusing on the pieces of either academic culture or fellowship culture that they're not aware of. Many fellows from underrepresented backgrounds have had to go through a lot to get to where they are. They are in areas where they have to navigate processes that they may have no context for or support for in their families. And the fact that they've made it to your office is a pretty big deal to begin with, right? So I think celebrate those pieces, as LaNitra said, give them recognize that what they're doing is probably uncharted territory for them and that you're there to support them during the process. And in a similar vein, I think there are a lot of things, the further on we get into our work, there are assumptions that we make that oh, well, all students know X, Y, and Z information, in part because we know it, but we forget sometimes that we didn't know it when we came in to the field, right? So part of it is also making transparent or obvious things that you may think are easily understood, that students will easily understand in their moment, that maybe logging on and accessing the online application seems easy and intuitive for you, but it's embedded somewhere in your website that is not intuitive, right? Or maybe it takes them to another website and it looks kind of funky. I will say that because we do that, right? Our application goes to a separate subdomain that can often look a little, well, is this actually the place where I should be? So I think just being clear, like LaNitra said, about the process, being clear that you're there to support them, assuming that you have the staff and the capacity to do that, because I also don't want to assume that every office or every advisor has the staff capacity to serve everyone with the same level of attention and detail. And you'll find that some students require more support than others. And you as an advisor also need to kind of figure out which are the students where you can kind of build out some independent strategies and let them go and then just do check-ins. And then the students who may require a little bit more support along the way.
Can I also just really support what Lily just said in terms of taking a strengths-based perspective and advising the students. I think that's really important to remind students of what it took for them to get from where they are to the university environment. So, that took incredible abilities to navigate. It took incredible resilience. It took really being able to deflect a lot of negative thinking to be successul. And that those are all important qualities that foundations are looking for to support students. And many students are conditioned to think that they're at a deficit, that just by who they are, it's not good enough. But really, our job is to convince them that the fact that they're here is an important statement about what their potential is. And so when I'm in the multicultural office at George Mason once a week, I'm blown away by these students. They've worked 3 jobs, they've taken 3 buses to get to campus, and they're all in there studying together. And that's in contrast to other students who, maybe live in their parents' basement, drive to campus, like no particular judgment, but it's a very different college experience. And yet these are the students who oftentimes also think that they're not capable or competitive for the awards. So my presence in that space is to remind them, like, this is the work that you're doing to be successful. That's the kind of work that will continue to serve you well in the future.
I'm sorry, Christine, can I add one thing?
Yes, no, y'all are saying really great points.
In addition, complementing LaNitra's last point, I do also think that oftentimes students see those aspects of what they're doing, like working at the Food Lion or working at Gap or working at Starbucks, is not connected to these prestigious fellowships. And my comment to the students is always, you should put everything that you've done on there, because there are probably things that you're doing in your work right now that are very applicable to the fellowship that you're applying to. For example, for the Pickering and the Wrangell fellowship programs, our fellows are going to go in to become Foreign Service officers. Their first tour is likely going to be a consular tour, which requires lots of customer service. And that's essentially what it is, right? If you've worked in retail, you all know what customer service looks like, right? You can navigate difficult conversations with upset customers. If you're managing the cashier's register, they've given you trust to manage money. And they should really, and as advisors, it's really important for us to help focus them on those things that they've been able to develop in the space where they are. Maybe they haven't held campus leadership positions, but they've done all of this other stuff outside that's demonstrated leadership and potential and customer service and all of the same types of things that align really well with many of our programs. It's just helping them see that those are valuable. Their strengths that they bring with them, I think is important. And it's our duty to help them see that, because they will likely not see that initially as, oh, well, I've had to work as a barista my whole undergrad, so I haven't really done other stuff. So maybe I'm not as competitive as everyone else. Well, don't count yourself out, because you've probably done some pretty interesting things there.
Yes, that's a really good point, and that is a pattern that sometimes I see with students, like or as they're about to graduate, or as they're applying for jobs, internships, and I ask them what kind of experience they have, and they kind of downgrade themselves. They don't realize sometimes all of the different things that they've done and how that can translate into transferable skills. So, definitely as advisors, we kind of have to, help them reflect and just pull it out of them. We do have some time for questions. Brianna had asked, how can advisors appease these fears of students not being able to succeed without sugarcoating things, which could definitely be a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah, that's tough. I would say that the trust building is important. If you have the time to work with the student, so that the no to them signals a loving no and not an exclusionary no. If you have the time, I think that's one way to be able to be honest with the student. If you have students who come in, and I have this too, sometimes students come in with very low GPAs, or like I said, somebody who's just looking at an opportunity for which they just don't meet the criteria. I do believe that it's best to be honest with the person, that it's not worth your time to apply for this award. It's not worth our university resources. Many times students don't understand you as a university resource. And so if you spend your time on an application that is not going to go anywhere, that's time that you can't spend recruiting other students and supporting other students. And sometimes it's hard for students to understand the bigger picture of what we do in nationally competitive awards. So, being honest with them and firm that a particular opportunity might not be right for them, but opening up another conversation about what opportunities they should consider. Or if they're not ready right now, what can they do to get there, to be ready for that opportunity? Sometimes awards have multiple times when you can apply, or you can reapply, or you can attempt to enter the awards process. And so a student may not be ready, for example, for the critical language scholarship their freshman year, even if they really want to apply. But if I say, okay, you need 2.5 more years of experience so that you can be at an intermediate language level, you should do that and then keep talking to me. And then in 1.5 years, you should apply for it. That helps them to understand that it's a longer no. So you're saying, well, not really right now, but in a few years, which is the same as no, not right now, but it's something that they can do soon. So having a couple different ways to say no that are, supportive of the student has been helpful to me.
I would echo that. I think helping students understand what the expectations are for the awards is really helpful. In my presentations, I never give a presentation without also mentioning the obligations that come in with the fellowship. Our fellowship program, I mentioned the time commitment. There's a 7-year commitment that you're signing up for. There's also having to meet clearance requirements, which for any federal opportunity that you're going to go through, whether that's an internship at the State Department or at the Treasury, many of them will require top security clearance, which is something that is a really big unknown for lots of underrepresented folks. I had no idea what it was when I was coming through undergrad. And the type of information that they're requesting can also be intimidating. So I try to be explicit about what it is that they're signing up for, so that they come in with their eyes open about what it is that they're applying to. So I think there is a way, as LaNitra said, to build in the trust aspect of it, where you're saying no, but you're saying it in a way, or you're saying yes, and there are some other things that I really want you to think about critically before you spend all of this time, your recommender's time, your fellowship advisor's time, in crafting this application, and really think about whether or not this is the right direction to take for you. And Carmen just added the clearance advice, and I would definitely encourage you to look at that, in part because the clearance process for our programs, but for any federal service, is going to be, it feels invasive. It is a process where they're asking your family members, your friends, acquaintances that you may not have talked to, maybe that ex-boyfriend that you broke up with 2 years ago and the relationship is not very good. Those are the types of things that they'll be going through. And if they're not ready for that, that's, you have a realistic conversation about that. I think the other thing is that we, especially for our high achieving underrepresented students, we push them to advance very quickly, that you have to do this, and they push themselves as well to move through really quickly. You need to get these fellowships immediately after you're done with undergrad. You need to apply for the Pickering in your senior year. You need to, in sort of this time frame, it's a little arbitrary, because they've maybe advanced really quickly in undergrad, they're doing really well. The expectation that they have for themselves is, well, I have to keep going. And sometimes the best position to take is to take some work time and just work for a little while, to really give yourself space. Because again, many of these students are either working and going to school, or going to school and have other obligations and they've never had an opportunity just to take space to do something, to have their own time. So I think it's also being realistic with students about what it is that they want moving forward. And with the discussion about graduate school in particular, many students that I hear are, oh, well, that's just sequentially what I should do, right? And it's really only recently in the last 10 years where I think undergrads have said, grad school is now the next step. And yes, grad school may be something that you need to do at some point. Do you need to do it right after you're done with your undergrad? Maybe not. And being able to have those conversations about whether or not they're prepared. Because the worst thing that could happen is that they get a fellowship that helps cover grad school. They go in their first semester and they tank because they're not ready for it. They're burnt out from the first 4 years of undergrad. That's terrible for everybody, for the students' mental health, for the families that have to, then help support and uplift the students. So I do think that it's important to have these critical conversations in a way that leads students to think about what's good for them in that particular place, and try not to think as much, still involving, but not as much everyone else's expectations for them.
Yeah, I think that, along the lines of Lily's last point, families and broader networks encourage students, you should go finish all of your education at once. If you leave, you might not want to go, you might not ever go back, and you need the graduate education to have a good job. But I find that many students do that, and they find out that they're in the wrong graduate program. So they still can't meet their career goal because they don't have the right degree. And now they've got graduate debt. So your choice is to either leave the program with debt and no degree, or to stay in a program that's not right for you with debt and not the right tools for your career. So it's difficult to fight against a tide of advice from other people saying that this is what you should do. And so, you really have to think about what's right for you. Just a quick example. I had a student who just graduated. She came to me. She studied Spanish. She's an African-American woman from New Jersey. And she said, I want to get a scholarship to go and study Spanish. And I looked at what she had done and her interests, and I said, no, don't do that. You're interested in Latin America. Your Spanish is at a high level. You probably need to start studying Portuguese and become fluent in both Spanish and Portuguese. And she found this idea, like no one had ever said this before. She hadn't even thought about it. So I said, think about it and let's talk about it. She came back to me. She applied and got the Boren Summer STEM Award to go to Brazil. And she discovered the joys of the African diaspora in Brazil, and really became captivated by the language. And she was afraid she would have left her Spanish behind, but now she has a Fulbright to go teach English in Colombia. So, part of the thing that I love to do in my job is to throw a wrench, if you will, into students' plans. If they come to me and say, well, I've got it all figured out and this is what I want to do, I like to use fellowships to say, how can I derail that? How can I help you redirect and think about another pathway? And oftentimes the student says, oh, actually, this was really helpful for me not to go straight through, or to take some time off, or to go to this other place that I hadn't thought of. So just to encourage the students to be open to a change in plans is helpful.
So we have time for one more question. So besides APSIA, what resources exist to educate advisors about opportunities so that they know what to draw out in students and make those connections? And if you have any links, you can just drop them down in the chat.
Yeah, so the other, there's an association of fellowship advisors called NAFA, the National Association of Fellowship Advisors. And they have a lot of professional development resources. They have a really great listserv. They offer conferences and meetings every summer for professional development. And many of the foundations, like Lilly, is a frequent attendee at that event. So the foundations will come and you can meet the foundation representatives and hear directly from them what they're looking for in students.
I'd also add that NASPA, the National Association of, I hate acronyms. NASPA, I'll find it. NASPA and AAC&U also have some really good advising resources, especially with regard to advising students from diverse backgrounds. Christine, were you going to say something? Correct.
I was going to ask if it's the NASPA for higher ed.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. They have some really good resources, just reading material to help better understand how to approach advising sessions, especially with students who maybe you do not identify with their specific background, but there are ways that you can still support students. I think oftentimes one of the things that I hear a lot from advisors is, well, I'm not X insert identity and I can't help in students from this background. And I wanted to say that that's not true. There are ways to do this effectively where, again, you're opening a conversation and listening and allowing the student to essentially provide you information that's relevant for helping understand their situation. So I would definitely encourage NASPA and AAC&U because they do have some really good reading material and kind of profiles of what other folks in the field are doing. I'll put in a plug if you're doing group sessions. NASPA has a document on brave space versus safe space, which I think is a really good way to think about developing rapport that pushes students to think about things, but in a space. So it's challenging them, but it's also developing a rapport and a trust where they can feel comfortable sharing that information. And again, this is not just for folks who identify as a person of color or women or LGBT or any number of identities. This is for everyone, for every advisor. And I would really encourage you to approach it that way, that you can have these meaningful conversations with students.
I also wrote a book in 2016 for NAPSA. There's so many acronyms. The Association of International Educators. It's called Exploring Education Abroad, a guide for racial and ethnic minority participants. And that in that guide, I talk about, the focus is study abroad, but the audience is for underrepresented students. And in that guide, I have a special section that talks about prestigious nationally competitive awards. and I interviewed 2 students who had gotten those awards. It's a small guide that you can use as an advisor, or you can get a box of booklets and send it to your students. In the virtual space, I'm trying to see if I can get that into a PDF as well.
So we're coming to an end, LaNitra, and Lily, do you have any last words before we conclude?
I do. It's always a pleasure to share the stage or the screen with Lily Lopez McGee. I have had such great experiences with students getting Pickering Awards, and it being a life-changing experience for them and so important for our public service needs right now. So, the Pickering program is one of the most supportive programs for underrepresented students interested in the Foreign Service. So, I'm thankful for Lily's leadership of that program, and I would highly encourage you to talk with her more about that program.
Ditto in sharing the love with LaNitra, because LaNitra is amazing too. She's been an active resource for folks in education abroad. She's done some really interesting stuff with Fulbright, which I would encourage you to take a look at. There's a whole initiative specifically with a few of the European countries in Fulbright on how to work with specifically Black students in a European context, which I think has been phenomenal. And yes, happy to talk about Pickering, Wrangell, and Payne, which are the 3 diplomatic fellowship programs that lead to careers in the Foreign Service. I'm also just happy to talk to students about fellowships in general. Again, this is a space that has ballooned in the last 10 years, which I don't think a lot of folks know about. And if people are interested in getting into fellowship advising and leading fellowships, I'm also happy to talk about that too. Thank you, Carmen, for your leadership on this. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what she's done. She's done some pretty incredible stuff these last couple of years with APSIA in terms of developing resources for students navigating conversations like this. So kudos to you, Carmen, in your leadership with APSIA.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Carmen, and thank you, Christine, for moderating this session.
Of course. It was my pleasure. LaNitra and Lily, you shared a lot of great advice and recommendations. This is definitely, a lot of advice that us advisors and the attendees, I'm sure you'll be able to take this to your students. Please share this with your colleagues. A lot of links were shared in the chat box. Go ahead and click them, save them, spread the word. But thank you so much for everyone attending today's session. Please make sure to join us on tomorrow on Friday at 2:30 p.m. There's another session on what APSIA does and how they can support advisors.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Lily and LaNitra and Christine. You all are amazing. And we look forward to sharing many more tools and resources with you tomorrow and engaging many more of your students in these great opportunities, because they're needed in the field and they're wanted in the field, and we want to see them really thrive with all of these different kinds of programs and experiences. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.